Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm Paul Armstrong from Reed Corporate. So boring old bauxite has become booming bauxite. The price has soared from under $80 a tonne to well over $100 a tonne in the past couple of months. This is largely on the back of very tight supplies. And it's worth noting that the market seems to be getting tighter and tighter by the day. Who would have thought that we're going to get to a time when bauxite is one of the hot metals of the moment? What a great time to be making a bauxite discovery, and that's exactly what David Flanagan and his team at Arrow Minerals has done. The results put out to the ASX this week have been nothing short of spectacular. The grades in particular are very strong, and they've outlined mineralisation over a 5 kilometre strike length. That remains open, and there's plenty more holes and assays to come. David's going to take us through what Arrow has on its hands at the Niagara bauxite discovery, and he's happy to take some questions. So if you'd like to send your questions through, please click on the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of the screen and send them through, and we'll put those to David when he's finished his presentation. In the meantime, over to you, David.
No, thanks very much, Paul. So I'll whiz through what Arrow's up to, and then look forward to taking questions from the viewers. So this cover page at the moment, this is taken in the middle of Busara North. So this is what the landscape looks like. This is where our pitting crews are. You're dealing with very thin soils on top of outcropping bauxite. And this pod of sort of surface outcrop is kilometres long by kilometres wide. And it varies in thickness from about 1 metre up to about 6 or 7 metres. It's really sweet. So I'll keep moving. So why bauxite? Why Guinea? Why are we where we are? So I joined the company about a year ago. The company had a tenement, Simandou North, which adjoins the world's biggest undeveloped, highest grade iron ore deposit anywhere. And iron ore, when it's on infrastructure and you've got good product, makes more money than just about anything. It's made more Australian billionaires. It's delivered Australia's biggest mining companies. It's well known. The technology for mining is well understood, and we've got some really good ground there. We've got an exploration target of about 500 million tonnes of atabarite. We've also got a bauxite project north of that line. So actually, if I sort of back up a little bit, it's one thing to have that iron ore project, but you also need to have access to a railway line. And Guinea's in the process of building a multi-user railway line which links those iron ore deposits at Simandou through to a port. And the railway line is going to be operated by a management company. It's a joint venture, and it's being built with about 400 million tonnes of capacity, but they've million tonnes per annum, or actually 160 million tonnes from those incumbents. So there's about 240 million tonnes of capacity on that line up for grabs, I reckon. Okay, so here we are. We love the iron ore commodity. There's infrastructure there. And then we started to think, okay, well, if there's all this capacity on the infrastructure, what are the other commodities in Guinea which are attractive? Which are the other commodities in Guinea which are capable of being developed and exported on that infrastructure line? Guinea is the world's largest exporter of bauxite. It takes 4 tonnes of bauxite to make 2 tonnes of alumina, and 2 tonnes of alumina go to 1 tonne of aluminium. Aluminium is one of the great future-facing metals. I'm not going to go through the list, but the world needs a lot of aluminium. So Guinea's got all this bauxite. It's got an amazing brand. It's #1 in the world. It's got #1 purity in the world. There's infrastructure there with capacity. What's there? So I scoured the tenements of Guinea in proximity to that infrastructure, spoke to lots of people, looked at lots of ground, looked at lots of historical exploration activities, and Vale had explored this tenement and then relinquished it, and it was picked up by someone else post-2007, and we acquired an option on that tenement. The big thing that happened on that tenement was Vale drilled it out in 2006, 2007 and defined a whole bunch of tonnes. We couldn't quote all of that exploration to the ASX, but we've gone in and drilled it. And while we've drilled it, we've learnt more and more and more about the bauxite market. Yes, the bauxite market's gone up in the last couple of months, right? But 4 years ago, it was only $40 a tonne. Now it's 106. Okay, so, Guinea's a massive market. The world's biggest companies are making super profits in bauxite. If there's an opportunity for us to do so, I'd love to. So I've just sort of given you a bit of a wrap on why iron ore and bauxite in Guinea, and why we're so excited about bauxite, and why we're investing time in educating the market on what bauxite can do for them as a shareholder. The other part of this is, it's a bit like the dog that chases the car. What do you do when you get one? Well, as part of the process of developing these target strategies, we've worked out what we think it will cost to develop one of these assets, and we worked out what we think the operating costs would be, and we think that it presents an opportunity for a low-cost startup operation that we can use as a foundation to grow. And opportunities in bulks where you can start small and then grow, that's where the opportunity is to build substantial value for shareholders and do wonderful things in the community. Rio Tinto, I think they're now the second biggest mining company in the world. In their first year, I think, what do they do now? 350 million tonnes of iron ore. In their first year, they did 700,000 tonnes. So from little things, big things grow. So that's, and once you get an operating brand and reputation, things can get easier to expand from there. So on the back of all of the previous exploration done on that bauxite tenement at Niagara, we came up with an exploration target of about 250 million tonnes at 40 to 46. Everything in this presentation is already in the public domain. So please read all of these slides in the context of going back, and you can find it all there. But we'll put this presentation up. And there's a bit on the summary on the Simandou North. We've got a team that are sort of operations fit. So Jeff Dowling, our chairman, Tommy, myself, Chris, Jeremy, Tony, Marcus, Musa, all of us have an operating background, and all of us have had a background in engineering, construction, permitting, marketing, infrastructure access, like all of that, acquisitions, all of that, financing, and in all of the relevant commodities in a range of African, Asian and Australian jurisdictions. And we've got lots of relationships out there, and we're very quickly coming up the curve and on maybe not doing everything the way it's always been done. I think there's some opportunities to improve some of the execution strategies. So right now, the railway line's being built, and right now we're drilling. The commodity prices are improving, and there's an opportunity, maybe not to be at the front of the queue to access all of that infrastructure, to be close to the front. And whilst we've been out there drilling the Simandou iron ore project and figuring out the execution strategy for that, we've also signed an MOU with Baosteel. Baosteel are a shareholder in all of the mining tenements which make up the Simandou iron system. So they're the only party that's an equity holder in all of those tenements and the rail and the port. And we consider them to be very influential, and they've also been key in relation to financing construction of that project. And we've also had conversations with other parties who are members of that syndicate, who are major players in the bauxite industry. So anyway, Niagara is about 100 k's from that railway line. It's our intention to go in there, define resources, and deliver a scoping study by the middle of 2025. And on the back of that, progress towards more studies and lodge our permits for mining as soon as we can. And we've started all work on the ground already in relation to community engagement, in relation to flora and fauna studies. We've done a risk assessment, and we haven't to date come across any impediments, anything that could get in the way or would not want us to be there. In fact, It's the opposite. Every time we meet someone, that it's basically, what can we do to help you get up and running quicker? And that's at every level. So it's a wonderful place to operate. Keeping in mind, we struck the option agreement in August, and we've done all of that permitting work, and we think we've now completed enough drill holes to report resources of an indicated and inferred nature before the end of November. So you can move very quickly in Guinea. The opportunity to do something meaningful is real. Here's a snapshot of the Niagara tenement. This is the southeast corner of that tenement. If I sort of go back a slide, this here is a zoom in of the tenement, and these are the existing roads, and this is the railway line corridor. The pink areas were all defined by Vale as having bauxite mineralization. And what we've done is we've gone in and sort of looked at existing access roads, whereby we could go in and as quickly as possible get in and drill between the Vale holes, where they defined and where they targeted sufficient horizons at sufficient grade to be viable in an operation. And we've gone in now and we've drilled all of that. I'll talk a bit about that now. So we went in and we planned to drill it on 300 by 300 meter spacings. And then you go in and you dig pits, and the drilling gives you enough data laterally to come up with an estimate of the resources. And these pits, which are about 750 mil by a meter, give you bulk samples to talk about the characteristics of the mineralization, the hardness, the bulk density, and allows you to have some larger samples to submit for value and use test work for when you work around justifying additional value in your product when you're dealing with the customers, and there's some spoils there. But as of today, 90% of that drilling is now complete, and 75% of the samples are in the lab. So there's still a few samples that are outstanding, and there's still a couple of holes left to be drilled. But on this slide, you can see all of the holes that have been completed. And these holes inside the green boxes are the ones that have been reported to date. So to date, we've reported about 25% of the drilling completed. Okay, and the intention of this drilling program was to define mineralization greater than a meter thick. That was going to be above 40%. That would then deliver a specification that matched the Guinea spec grade. So the Guinea bauxite specification is -3% silica and 45% alumina. So for those of you who don't know, the equivalent of the Platts 62 index in iron ore is the Guinea 45 index. Okay, so the 45 index to our project is the same as the 62 index to the Pilbara. Okay, and the place to go find that is the CM Group. And there's also some other listed companies out there that sort of publish well, and they publish research on them. The guys at Shaw and Partners and Petra Capital, they publish research on Metro Mining, and it's a good place to go and read that they are a good business, and that the research on them is good research, and it'll allow you to understand the traditional thicknesses that are mined, the tonnages that are mined, the contaminants, and why Guinea is a premium product. We reported some intercepts recently, 49% and alumina and 0.7% silica. Like, that's caviar. You could just about eat that stuff. There's, that's like having O negative. That'll go anywhere. Here's a snapshot on Niagara, the northern part, Busara North here, and Busara Central. In here, the northern part, the average thickness of that is about 6 meters. The average thickness of this part, just the drilling we've got back, keeping in mind we've only got a quarter of the drilling back, is about 2.3 meters. And then in here at the southern part, now we weren't expecting much from these holes. But despite that, the average thickness of this mineralisation around here is about 2 metres. So for those of you who haven't seen it, a bauxite deposit is not like a gold deposit or a normal iron ore deposit. They are thin and they are flat, and they just, like a coal deposit, they just go and go and go. And you mine them a bit like a wheat harvester. So these surface miners come through with a drum with picks on it, and they just take it off in strips. So if you sort of have a look at I don't know if you can sort of see here, this is the ground, and then you're straight into rock. So, and this is typical here, what's happening in Perth in the hills, where you've got the guys operating in bauxite. They will take off the topsoil, maybe 20, 30 centimetres, or here it might be thick in WA, but in Guinea it's not. And then they will push it up with a bulldozer, or they will come through and level the ground with a surface miner and then take it down in strips. So this is typical for Guinea. The surface miners can go as thin as 28 centimetres or as thick as 47 centimetres, but they can't mine really more than 50 centimetres in a run. That's about their limit. So they're very comfortable with those thicknesses. We're dealing with large areas. And when you have a look at the scale of these areas, and if you look at, okay, well, I can't actually read all these numbers, but over 300 metres, if you go from 4 metres thick down to 1 metre thick or something like that, or from 5 metres to 3 metres, you're talking about over 300 metres, a 2 metre fall. So that's less than a 1% incline. And the surface miners are capable of doing 8 to 10%. So what you do is you feed your geological model into the surface miner, and it's basic and basic and basic, and it will follow the contour of your surface model. So from here, this drilling will be sufficient for indicated and inferred resources and a scoping study. And then post that, we will do some infill drilling as part of additional reserve work. And then there will be more infill drilling just before mining. But fundamentally, before we start mining, we'll have more to say about all of the deposits. We'll be able to talk about production schedules over time, and we'll actually have a lot of that information also by the middle of next year. There's a bit of a graph there showing the bauxite price over time. It's performed really well. It's Simandou North, just a bit of a snapshot there. We've drilled 500 holes there this year, and there's a bunch of samples right now in the lab helping us design our flow sheet. We'll have more to talk about on that in the next couple of months. And then that will go in and help us target our areas for drilling, upgrade to resources, and then scoping studies. But basically from here, we will have all of the drilling results on Niagara back before Christmas. And we will have probably resources out in the first quarter next year on Niagara. And we'll have all the met work out on Simandou in the first quarter. And then we'll go on to produce the scoping study on Niagara by the middle of next year. And hopefully we've got some wonderful numbers to tell everyone about, and everyone gets very excited and the share price goes up a lot. There's a picture of us with the local community. So, Paul, that's kind of my snapshot. I've gone a couple of minutes over, but happy to take questions from anyone on anything.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dave. There are a few questions, so we'll go through them in the order they've come in. One asks, if you had to take an educated guess, do you think bauxite will be mined first by Arrow? I assume that means first, i.e. before iron ore.
Yeah, it's a good question. So at the moment, the execution strategy for the bauxite is one where we just mine it and truck it and then rail it and then ship it. Actually, in fact, it's worth pointing out that one of the groups we've been talking to about the surface miner, it comes through and you can change the pick size on the drum as it's taking the strip off, and it actually can deliver you the product specification particle size you want. And what I mean by that is if the customer wants 100% passing 100 mil. We can produce 100 mil product on the surface miner, which means we don't need a crusher. So we literally run the surface miner and pick up that product and off it goes. Whereas with the iron ore, we almost certainly will be drill and blast, crush and screen, and then run through spirals. Now, there is a little bit more complexity to that because you've got the spiral step, and that means that there's a little bit more capital involved and maybe a bit more complexity around permitting. But you sort of, Australia's richest people made their money out of a volatile iron ore market. I have personally seen the iron ore price go from $80 to $25 back to $80 within 6 months. And it creates massive opportunity because people forget about how good iron ore can be. So we are going to progress them both. At the moment, the simplicity and the DSO nature of the bauxite would suggest, and shareholders are quite supportive of us heading down that path. So I would say on balance, if we were pressing the button today, right here, right now, it probably would be bauxite. But we're probably a way off doing that.
Okay. Our next question, David, is any chance of a share consolidation?
Yeah, no, I've been getting a bit of that from people, and absolutely, it feels like one of the things that is holding us back is the tick price difference between 0.1 and 0.2. People don't like having a stop loss, which is 50% down from where they are. Like people, that comes back to me. But we owe it to shareholders to give them a red hot chance to get the stock up and up as a first priority. And we'll deal with some of those things in due course. Yeah.
Right. Another question says, as much a statement as anything, David, the company faces a couple of issues: lack of capital and the amount of shares on issue. How do you propose to overcome those? I think you've addressed the second one. Will the next capital raise be dilutive, or are you looking at selling equity in the project?
Look, we have had discussions with parties in relation to equity in all of both of our projects. Okay, so absolutely. There's, and typically we've funded things by issuing shares because I suppose, in the absence of a joint venture, things happen pretty quickly, but there's a cost to that in the dilution of shareholder equity. Also, if you sort of sell equity in your project, you're diluting the ownership of your project. So no, it's on the table. It's things we think about from time to time, and we do want to deliver the best outcome we can for shareholders. So we'll see how that goes.
Right. Now, another questioner says, David, Guinea is restricting bauxite exports from GAC. What is your view on how this will play out? Is it similar to what Indonesia did to the nickel concentrate?
No, it's completely different to the nickel concentrate. So, the guys at the CM Group, they publish quite widely on this. There's a lot of intelligence there that they publish on the bauxite industry. And yesterday they published an article which looks very well researched. And it basically says that the government of Guinea provided those guys a substantial tax concession on the basis that they deliver downstream processing, and that the tax concession, by all intentions, looks like it was sufficient to fund a large portion of that refinery. And that was 12 years ago. And there's nothing happened since. So Guinea's a poor country. Half the kids don't make it to the age of 4. And they really are working hard to deliver benefits there and sort of, create access to basic health, basic education, basic infrastructure, basics that, that we all take for granted. So just because the government makes a decision and puts their foot down, please don't assume that it's not for the best interests of the country. In this case, it looks like, in talking to the government as well, they just want jobs and benefits for the local people, and they want, people to stick to the deal.
an obvious question here. When will the market react to these results, David?
Yes. So this is, we talk about this all the time. So like I've been involved in running listed companies for about 20 years, and share prices don't always respond the way that you think. That the market's a very interesting place. You know, we've announced, you know, some what I think are terrific results from a quarter of the holes, and from my personal resource estimate, which is not like SRK will be doing our resource work, and they're the ones who've guided us on our spacings and our techniques and all that sort of stuff to get to indicated and inferred. But on what I've seen already in the drilling, I'm ready to go get the trucks out there now. That's how happy I am, right? And sometimes it just takes the market a little while to get it. And sometimes the market goes over a tipping point for something that appears a little bit inconsequential, but you know, it creates some leadership in one investor or an investor group, and off they go. Or you know, we sign up a deal with someone who provides the independent verification for the quality of everything that we're saying. Or someone appears on the register and they start chomping away, as has happened in the case before. So we'll see what happens. I fundamentally believe in the value of what we're doing. You know, for people out there, with the gold price at 2,260 US an ounce, or what is it, 2,600 an ounce, and bauxite price at about 105, 25 million tons of bauxite has about the same value of 1 million ounces of gold. Okay, but I've worked in gold before. Bauxite doesn't have the nugget effect. It'll probably have a strip ratio well below 1-to-1, and there won't be a need for any recovery, you know, fine grinding, no roasting. You know, there's no nugget effect. It's beautiful, and bauxite is one of those commodities that's built the fortunes of Alcoa, Rio Tinto, BHP, these massive conglomerates, and they often mine the deposits and integrate the bauxite from the mine through to their own alumina refinery or even their own aluminium smelter, and the ore moves around the world, and profits centres sort of moved around the world, and they have sustained highly successful businesses for the long term. And the more I learn about the bauxite market, the more I see what I saw in iron ore. And that was, maybe there's a chance to build a serious mid-tier bulks company that can deliver massive returns for shareholders and amazing outcomes for local communities. Like, it may well be that the most wonderful thing I ever get to do is to deliver an amazing outcome for the people of Guinea.
Now, the last two questions we can probably put into one, Dave,
Okay.
relate to the train, the railway. Bit of an update: are the Chinese building it? When will it be completed? And tied into that, a question about, given that speed to market is obviously a key issue, would Arrow consider mining and stockpiling ore before the railway line is finished?
Yeah, there's a couple of good questions there. So the railway line is currently being built in 3 segments. So there's the main line, which runs from the port to Simandou. Now, that railway line, all of the bridges are completed. There's something like 189 bridges, all done. There's 27 kilometres of tunnelling done. It's all of the civil works in preparation for that whole length done. I understand they have started laying rail, and the rail will be laid for commissioning and testing all the communication networks from June, July next year. There are 2 segments of rail to be built which link the winning consortium iron ore mine to that line and the Rio Simfer consortium to that line. It's unlikely that everything in relation to both of those projects and those lines will be completed by the end of next year. But both of those parties have the capacity to truck short distances to that railway line and have stockpiles ready to go by the end of next year. We've had conversations informally with Rio people, and they're very confident that they'll meet that timeline by the end of next year, which will test and get everything up and running. We ourselves, it's inconceivable to me that we would be ready next year. It feels as though our best would be in the second half of 2026. Okay. Would we stockpile product next to the railway line? You bet we would. Absolutely. Particularly if we were able to structure an agreement where we were paid on delivery of that product to the stockpile. Because, if you look at some of the incumbents in the Pilbara, they might, between their mines and the ports, they might have 10, 20, 40, 50 million tonnes of iron ore in stockpiles in all different places, so they can manage their blending strategies through the port, so they can optimize throughput on their infrastructure through the port, through their shipping to the customer. All that is all real, and that would absolutely add value to a bauxite business or an iron ore business in Guinea, 100%. And we absolutely would welcome that opportunity to give someone that flexibility, for sure. So we'll see what happens.
That concludes questions. I think you've answered them all, Dave. It's fantastic. Thanks very much for your time. Obviously, a great story. Still very much in the early phases, but to have made a discovery so quickly with such great promise. I can see why people are asking, when is the market going to react? For anyone who's watched this today, thanks for joining us. There will be a recorded version of this available. So please avail yourselves of that opportunity and pass it around, and we'll put it up on the social sites and on the Arrow website. Thanks very much for your time.